to recording. Okay. Then now it's not necessary to share. Okay, I'm going to read what Sonia Stefanizzi wrote. She wrote, "It's a pleasure to open this seminar and to welcome on behalf of the Department of Sociology and Social Research the presentation of the book Ecomuseums and Climate Change, edited by Nunzia Borrelli, Peter Davis, and Raul Dal Santo. I think it's important to emphasize the relevance of this book and place it in a sociological analysis perspective for several reasons. First, ecomuseums can involve people consolidating their identity as citizens through a series of actions within a shared project. Second, ecomuseums intend to contribute to the rise of a different project of the future capable of valorizing territorial heritage in a perspective of collective well-being. Third, in a framework of economic, social, and health crisis, the creation of a solid and branched local network rich in relational and social capital assume a crucial importance in determining the capacity of a territory to grow social cohesion even before economic growth. To sum up, ecomuseums represent a form of contamination with other forms of participatory governance of action, where the landscape becomes a place of civil and cultural rebirth of our communities and a renewed dialogue with institutions and the non-profit world. I sincerely hope you can have a profitable afternoon. Have a good conference." She finished. So Maurizio Casiraghi maybe reach us later, he sent a message. So we need to, I can give the word to Agostina Ravagnino. Yes, please. Thank you, Agostina.
Thank you. And it's a great pleasure to be here today for the presentation of this important book, Ecomuseums and Climate Change. I bring you the personal greetings of our Assessore Francesca Caruso, engaged today in other institutional commitments. Let me say about these themes and about this book presentation that cultural institutions are drivers in general of local development, but these particular themes belong to ecomuseums, which base their own action on community participation and on sustainable growth of local systems. Ecomuseums offer strategic tools and good practices that can contribute to the global debate on climate change, on biodiversity loss, and sustainability. Let me say that current landscapes are largely an outcome of the influence of humans on nature and the coexistence of human and nature in a century-long process, very long process. Traditional farming, cultural practices, and the local context have created a likely diverse mosaic of different cultural landscapes, so that from international to local level, the goal towards which research and policies converge is the ecological transition. Ecomuseums are essential to ensure a sustainable future. They play a key role on these themes in increasing knowledge and in raising awareness about these topics, not only, but also in disseminating sustainable practices inside the local communities. Since 2007, Lombardy region has supported ecomuseums as cultural institutions, and in 2019, Lombardy region updates the requirements for the regional recognition of this particular cultural institution. And with a new call last year, Lombardy region recognized 2 new ecomuseums, and the new asset today is of 36 ecomuseums inside our territories recognized by our Lombardy region institution. So I thank all our ecomuseums for the energy and passion with which they carry out their work in our territories, and I wish everyone a good job thinking to the motto, heritage produce, heritage protects and inspires, activating a cooperation process on these themes all over the world, as today we can see. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you so much for your greetings and for your comments. We sincerely hope that this is the first step to reason much more in the future together. Okay, I can give you the words to Alberto. If you want, you can stay there. Yes. Okay. Maybe.
Okay. Well, dear friends and colleagues, as past president of ICOM and now president of ICOM Foundation, I am honored to be with you today. I warmly thank Nunzia Borrelli, Peter Davies, Raul Del Santo for inviting me to the presentation of a volume that I consider a milestone in contemporary museology. This volume is a unique journey through the multivalent, diverse, complex, changing and exciting world of the eco-museums and museums facing the challenges of the 21st century. Since 1972, when UNESCO and ICOM organized the famous conference in Santiago de Chile, eco-museums have given a decisive theoretical and operative contribution to the social role of museums. Museums and eco-museums have different origins, history, experiences, and approach. However, they are part of the global change and face the same global challenges: sustainable development and climate crisis, digital revolution and urban regeneration, pandemics and conflicts, inequality and racism, migration and inclusion, respect of diversity and decolonization. In recent years, museology and museums have changed radically. I recently wrote the entry Museology and Museography for the Italian Treccani Encyclopedia of Contemporary Art, where I pointed out the role and the impact of new museology and eco-museology on museums' theory and practice. The view of museums solely as conservation institutions is now totally outdated. The core functions of museums, research, conservation, exhibition, education, and communication of collections remain a priority. However, museums have taken new responsibilities about the communities they are part of and from which their collections originate. Museums have become communication hubs. They promote participation and inclusion, engage in intercultural dialogue, and address new audiences. Museums and eco-museums live in the contemporary age and deal with the crucial issues and problems of our troubled times. In 2019, UNESCO estimated that there are 104,000 museums all over the world. Each one has its own specific identity and mission. Ecomuseums and community museums are fruitful evidence of the diversity of museums. To respond to the growing expectations of communities, ICOM has decided to update the definition of museums approved in 2007. Last year, in Prague, a new definition of museum was enthusiastically approved by ICOM General Assembly. The first sentence of the new definition contains key terms that were already present in the 2007 one. A museum is a not-for-profit permanent institution in the service of society that researches, collects, conserves, interprets, and exhibits tangible and intangible heritage. The second and third sentences of the new definition include many innovative concepts. Open to the public, accessible and inclusive, museums foster diversity and sustainability. Museums operate and communicate ethically, professionally, and with the participation of communities, offering varied experiences for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. Each term of the new definition expresses one of the challenges that museums are facing. The new definition reflects what museums are today and expresses the geographical, cultural, and professional diversity of the global museum community. Many key issues raised by ecomuseums are relevant in the new ICOM museum definition, as well in several resolutions approved by ICOM General Assembly since 2016. The attention given to diversity, to participation, to sustainable development of communities, as well as to the intangible aspects of communities' heritage. The new ICOM definition aligns with the UNESCO recommendation on the social role of museums and with the United Nations Agenda 2030 and its 17 global goals of sustainable development. In September 2019, ICOM General Assembly in Kyoto passed a resolution on sustainability and the implementation of Agenda 2030. The 2030 Agenda has become the fundamental reference for ICOM's work. In 2021 and 2022, ICOM joined the Global Coalition United for Biodiversity and the Climate Heritage Network. The devastating effects of the climate change and loss of biodiversity continue to impact our natural and cultural heritage globally. A few months ago, newspapers reported that the indigenous man called Man of the Hole died in Brazil. He was the only inhabitant of the Tanaru indigenous territory in Rondônia state and the last surviving member of his tribe, massacred by gunmen, colonists, and ranchers in the 1970s. He was a living proof that indigenous communities are at the forefront of the respect of diversity. Not only are indigenous livelihoods threatened, also their cultural heritage cannot survive without their natural habitats. Even native languages are in constant decline as a result of colonization and of the climate crisis. Fighting the climate crisis and the loss of biodiversity is an imperative of our times. No development can be sustainable without culture, and this volume confirms that museums, eco-museums, and heritage play a key role in fostering knowledge, awareness, and behavior changes, as well as in supporting environmental policies, mitigation strategies, and sustainable practices in local communities. In conclusion, I would like to say that global challenges ask for local, coordinated actions. The relevance of museums and eco-museums in the future will depend on how they will be able to confront global change and cooperate on a local level, but also on the national and international scenarios. This volume will become a solid reference book for professionals and volunteers facing social change and global challenges. My best compliments to the editors, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Alberto, for your very interesting speech. We are absolutely agree with you. We need to organize local action because this is the only way to define a global strategy. And we are here for reasoning about that, about which kind of a local action we can imagine for the future. Okay, we can ask Peter to come here, and we can start the second part of this event. That's me. Okay. As I said before, I don't need to say many things. All people that work in the eco-museums field know Peter by his papers, books, and so on. So I ask him to start to present our book. And let me say super thank you, Peter, because it was very important for publishing this book. He helped a lot. Definitely, we collected a lot of chapters. And he helped a lot for not only in reading the contents of every chapter, but also for English. He helped us a lot. So thank you very much, because he dedicated all summer. We work all summer, and but we are happy for the result that we obtained. So thank you again, Peter. Okay.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you, Nunzia. And it's absolutely great to be here. Absolutely delighted, actually, to be in Milan. So many thanks to the University of Milano-Bicocca for hosting this event and inviting me to speak and say a little bit about this book, Ecomuseums and Climate Change, which we as editors are very proud of. My thanks go also to the previous speakers for their institutional greetings. As you've heard from Alberto, ICOM were very supportive of the conference that inspired this book, a conference that attracted more than 100 delegates. So we're hugely grateful to ICOM for the support. There are several other organizations and people I need to thank, but at the top of my list go my co-editors here, Nunzia and Raul, who kindly accepted my, I have to admit, often picky and challenging interventions and fussy English corrections. But they were an absolute pleasure to work with. And of course, the same can be said of all the authors who contributed to this book, profiling their personal and institutions' efforts to tackle climate change issues and work towards the Sustainable Development Goals. As an editor, I learned a great deal from all of them. So working with them, for me, was a very enriching experience. So yes, it was hard work, but I learned a great deal, so thank you very much. And I must end my thanks really for the marvelous support we received from our publishers, L'Edizione, and from Nicola in particular. They acquired the funds from a climate change foundation to enable the participation and publication of this book. Not only did they actually produce a very attractive book, but they actually found the money to enable it to be published at all. So it wouldn't have happened without them. So thanks very much to them. So this book, I regard it as a treasure trove. So inside it, you will find wisdom, creativity, dynamism, perseverance, and fortitude that all the authors demonstrate, often facing huge problems to deliver their aims alongside their local communities. These problems include money, or more often the lack of it, which is also a problem, but also local politics and local politicians are not easy to navigate. Maintaining the interest in heritage projects is also always a challenge. I think starting projects is one thing, but keeping the energy and commitment of volunteers is not easy. And of course, that's how eco-museums work. Often they don't have paid staff, but they work entirely with volunteer groups and with individuals. So in these 382 pages and 17 diverse chapters, it's a big book, okay? You will find theoretical guidance and practical examples of how eco-museums have risen to the challenges of supporting their communities. They've sought not only to find solutions to immediate problems, but also to prepare strategies for what is an unknown but predictably difficult future. The Earth is in trouble, and we are indeed walking a tightrope to the sun, as the artist Joey Guidone's cover illustration captures so brilliantly. I was so pleased to find this artist and find this illustration for the cover, because I think it's a wonderful, evocative cover for the book. So thanks to him also. And art, of course, is such an important asset for informing and challenging people. And it is profiled in many of the chapters throughout the book, but especially so by Ginevra Addis's chapter, who looks at the use of contemporary art in eco-museums. So that's a really interesting one to look at. I don't plan to describe the book's contents in detail, but it is important, I think, to indicate to you its international scope, with contributions not only from Italy, but also from Spain, Canada, Brazil, Tanzania, Scotland, and Poland. The book actually is in two parts, and the first 6 chapters take a more theoretical stance and include an exploration of the connections between eco-museum principles and the Sustainable Development Goals, a description of a proposed model to aid museum transformation, an account of the Eco-Heritage Project, which you've heard a little bit about already at the start of the meeting, and also observations on how democratic processes can enable eco-museums to aid the SDGs and climate change issues. In the second part, you'll find wide-ranging ideas and approaches to tackling climate issues and the SDGs, which reflect in many ways, I think, the pliable and plastic nature of the eco-museum concept itself. All eco-museums adapt to their specific social, cultural, and environmental contexts. So you'll find practical ideas that may be useful to you in your situation, particularly those relating to tourism, place marketing, and its potentially positive economic impact. Reading these chapters, you'll also realize that important social issues, which have been touched on already, including population growth, inequality, migration, globalization, and the environmental problems of habitat loss, biodiversity loss, and pollution, are a focus for eco-museum activists. So perhaps we could or should regard these issues as the driving force behind what we seek to achieve within our communities and the landscapes that we care for. Eco-museums are social institutions, and this comes across very clearly in all the chapters in this book. However, I would like to single out Gelson Almeida's chapter about the Ecomuseu Ilha Grande in Brazil as one specific example of social impact. This eco-museum, founded in 1999, has found ways of helping the island's citizens and their economy, which for many years was based on agriculture and fishing, but is now experiencing the impact of mass tourism. The island is now arguably one of the most visited tourist destinations in Brazil, and the island's traditional communities with their own customs, traditions, and identity, feel threatened. So importantly, the Ecomuseum has created spaces, exhibition areas, a community library, botanical garden, artisan workshops, and a community centre. Spaces where residents can meet and participate in discussions about the island's future. Difficult issues are dealt with too, so including a special health project to prevent suicide, monitoring the threatened marine environment that surrounds the island, creating innovative ways of recycling. So I feel this Ecomuseum and its activities deserve to be better known in the museum world, and I hope this book will help to spread the word. At an online meeting last week in La Ponte Ecomuseum in Spain, I was asked to say something about the book and why it's important. It's really not a difficult case to make. If you watch or read the news, you have seen that climate predictions remain very, very worrying, with high temperatures likely to be reached across Europe between now and 2027. This year, we will probably see the highest temperatures ever recorded in Europe being broken yet again. Climate is now unpredictable. Droughts, floods, extreme weather events will become more common. And here in Italy, I don't have to tell you about this. The extreme rain and floods in Emilia-Romagna resulted in the deaths of several people and an estimate of several millions of euros of damage and a major loss to culture and nature. In Spain, 20% of the country is experiencing extreme drought, and even the wonderful wetland of the Doñana is under threat. Okay, you need to get me a bit closer. Okay.
Yes, closer, yes, please.
So finally, I'm going to come back to Leonardo. And when you get hold of the book, you can see that I mention him actually in the introduction. When I started thinking about the introduction for the book, I was actually reading Isaac Jacobson's biography of Leonardo, which is a fantastic book. And I learnt of his fascination, or Leonardo's fascination, with the idea of apocalypse and how it influenced much of his artwork and writing. And I wonder how Leonardo would actually feel about the current state the Earth is in, because in effect, we are now facing what Leonardo only ever imagined. So what solutions might he have devised? Interesting one to think about. Unfortunately, we don't have a genius like Leonardo to help us. We've just got rather inept politicians, I'm afraid. Well, that's certainly the case in the UK anyway. Maybe different here in Italy. But solutions to immediate and local problems and strategies for the future can be developed through local action, and that is where eco-museums can play a role. Eco-museums can inform and energize communities. They can be a catalyst for action. They can find ways of promoting the means of transitioning to living more sustainably. So this book deserves to be widely read. It may be different in Italy, but certainly in other parts of Europe, and certainly in much of the English-speaking world, eco-museum actions are largely missed or even ignored by most of the museum worlders. Certainly, most museum curators I've met would not be able to define what eco-museums are or what they do. This book has the potential and the ability to change those perceptions. We need to see the book being widely reviewed in the museum press, in journals and in newsletters. We need to make sure that it features in ICOM's e-newsletters to its members. So I'd like to end with a plea, really. Please promote the book. Make it better known. Use your contacts, use your colleagues. Say, hey, I've just read this great book. You should see it. It's really important. It's a good read. Spread the word. Thank you.
You can stay here, please. Do you want to say something? Okay, thank you very much, Peter. We sincerely appreciate your presentation. I would like just to say that in this case, it's very easy to promote our book because it is an open source. So we don't need it. Where you say promote the book, I just wanted to say, let people, inform people that this book was produced and that it's possible to, it's very easy to download it and to read the contents. A very few words I wanted to add to what Peter say, and because we are in a department of sociology and social research, let me to remember what Anthony Giddens said, that is a very famous sociologist, what Anthony Giddens says about the relationship among agency and the structure. Structure, as maybe many of us know, is the way of thinking, our way of thinking and our way of doing. And what Giddens wants to highlight is that our way of thinking and our way of doing can be changed by the social action. So this is what we are trying to do. We wanted to work on social action because we are sure that it's possible to work on the way of doing and the way of thinking. It's possible to work on the discourse and practices. So this event is a way for start thinking to social action that can be in some way work on the discourse and practices that are consolidated in the structure but that can be changed. So now I can let the word to the discussant. We can start with Michael Jacobson. He is the co-founder of the National Food Museum in Washington. Thank you very much, Michael, to be connected. I sincerely appreciate also because I know that you are in Washington. In Washington is morning, and I know also that you have another meeting in maybe in 20 minutes, I know. Okay, so I immediately ask you to start making some comments to the book and other advice. Maybe we can also put it, okay. Okay. Okay, Michael, can we hear you? Do you need to share some document or not?
No,
okay.
No screen sharing. Thank you very much, Nunzia, for inviting me to participate in this meeting, and congratulations to you and your editors, co-editors, for producing this really remarkable, innovative book. I'd like to start by telling you a little about who I am and how I get here. I guess my association with museums started when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I lived in Chicago, and my family regularly went to some of the major museums in Chicago. And then I'll skip ahead a little, got a little older, and about 45, 50 years ago, I co-founded the Center for Science in the Public Interest. That is a consumer advocacy organization in Washington, D.C. We focus mostly on nutrition and food safety issues, and we led successful campaigns to obtain federal laws to require nutrition labels on packaged foods, to ban artificial trans fat, to improve the nutritional quality of school meals, improve food safety laws, and other things. We also were not just an advocacy lobbying organization, but an educational organization. We published the Nutrition Action Health Letter that at one point had over 1 million paid subscribers in the United States and Canada. And I didn't realize, but we also sponsored several activities related to museums. One was a report on science museums and the corporate influences on those museums. Some of them, like the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago and a museum in Los Angeles, were almost like industry trade shows where they rented out space to major companies to install their products. a major tractor company, General Motors, and others. I didn't call it a pop-up exhibit or a traveling exhibit, but we sponsored a couple of projects. We sent 2 nutritionists around the country in a brightly painted van, and they stopped at schools, senior citizen centers, radio stations, television stations, and they had with them devices to talk about nutrition, models of food, for instance, packages of food, so they can talk about labeling and deceptive labeling. And they went on a journey of about 7,000 miles talking about nutrition. And we had another project where we built a junk food hall of shame. It was a it was essentially a bookcase with glass-fronted doors, like a museum case might have. And in that we had displays showing different aspects of food. One, for instance, showed it deconstructed sugar frosted flakes, a popular breakfast cereal, showing what it was made of. We had a bowl of 5 ounces of corn flour, 5 ounces of sugar, because it was 50% sugar, and then a tube with artificial colorings, flavorings, and preservatives. And when we showed that to the public, it generated global publicity and increased the number of visitors to the venue enormously. So I didn't know that those kinds of things would, in my background, would ultimately lead to the founding of a museum, the National Food Museum. And that museum, don't come to Washington now expecting to visit it. We're at an early stage, developing a strategic plan and then the fundraising. So maybe in 4 or 5 years, come to Washington and we will have a wonderful museum. And it's going to feature activities on many aspects of food, cultural, historical, and scientific. And my particular interests are the effect of diet on health and the effect of farming on climate change and other environmental issues. So I'm new to the museum world and hope you'll excuse my relative ignorance of what has been happening with this burgeoning world of eco-museums. Your book, Ecomuseums and Climate Change, is a great introduction to those institutions. I was really impressed by the many museums, especially in Europe, but really throughout the world, that are involving their local communities in highlighting their heritage and protecting the local ecosystem, not just the natural ecosystem, but also the cultural ecosystem. However, I was surprised that the book, with its title including the words climate change, and the many eco-museums discussed in the book, devoted little attention to the topic of climate change. For instance, the term greenhouse gas was only mentioned half a dozen times in a book of roughly 350 pages. For somebody like me interested in food, diet, and farming, I hope that eco-museums, as well as traditional museums, would devote significant attention to those very important topics. After all, what we eat is a major contributor to climate change. Globally, food and agriculture account for about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, and animal agriculture accounts for almost half of that, 15%. That's equivalent to the transportation sector. And cattle are responsible for 2/3 of animal agriculture's role in greenhouse gas emissions. Yet the words beef, meat, and methane do not appear once in the book. I was very surprised. And then, of course, in addition, food and farming have additional impacts that occur at local, national, and global levels, such as air and water pollution, degradation of the ocean floor, food waste in landfills, and the loss of biodiversity. And of course, what we eat has enormous health impacts. Meat, especially processed meats like bacon and ham, and dairy products contribute significantly to heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and cancer. In the United States, more than 1 out of 6 deaths, 500,000 deaths a year, are caused by what people eat. Fortunately, the dietary changes that would protect the environment are generally the same ones that would protect health. And in a nutshell, in summary, it means we should be eating a more plant-based diet. We don't have to all become pure vegans, but we should definitely move in the direction of plant-based diets. Ecomuseums are ideal venues for engaging the community on environmental and dietary issues, especially because food and farming are not abstract concepts, but things to which everybody can relate. Such museums could certainly celebrate the food cultures of people who have lived in a town for centuries. They could also celebrate the food ways of recent immigrants. They could explain where food used to be grown and where food is now grown and manufactured. They could trace dietary changes over the past 100 years, in many cases going from a diet of mostly locally produced natural foods to both packaged and fresh foods produced thousands of miles away. We live in a global food system. And they can inform people about how our food choices may lead to excessive greenhouse gas emissions, how climate change affects community health and the visitor's own health, and the kinds of diets that are far healthier for the planet and the person. The means of engagement can take all kinds of forms: interactive exhibits and activities at the museums, temporary exhibits at community centers and train stations, discussions with local farmers and environmentalists, and activities at schools and online for children and adults. Museums could offer an integrated view of climate change, other environmental problems, public health, and even worker justice and animal welfare. Of course, the topic of climate change does not belong only at small local eco-museums, but all museums, including science and art museums, as well as historical centers. Large urban museums certainly have the capacity to sponsor activities in their local communities. I think in particular of the Smithsonian Institution, a large museum complex here in Washington, D.C. They have huge museums, but they also have sponsored a small community-oriented museum, which you might consider an eco-museum in a low-income part of Washington. It had an exhibit on food that showed how local community activists over the past century mounted efforts to influence major and also to educate school children. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you much success in your conference and in the broader efforts to strengthen eco-museums in Italy and throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Oh, just one moment. Maybe also here. Sorry. Okay. Too much technology for us. I'm sorry for that. Okay, thank you very much, Michael. I sincerely appreciate your contributions. I would like just to, let me just to say two things. and that maybe can also help us to clarify the main aim of this book. When we suggest to the Ecomuseums to write chapters about what they are doing for the climate action and for sustainable development goals, we know, because we already done a survey, that this topic was not so much tackled by the Ecomuseums. But our idea was also to stimulate Ecomuseums in a reasoning about what they already done and what they can also do in the future. So the main aim of the book was to give some stimuli to the Ecomuseums and also for reasoning about how they can improve their activities in the climate action field and in the sustainability field. I would like just to underline this point that was not enough highlight before. Okay, thank you. Then I can ask to Rita Capurro to... come here. To join us.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rita. Rita, she's a colleague. She works here in the University of Milano-Bicocca, and she's also one of the coordinators of a very interesting project of an open museum here in Bicocca. So thank you very much, Rita, to be here today.
Thank you for your invitation, and unfortunately my partner in crime, Federica Zuccoli, is involved in a PhD discussion. So
yes, it's a very full day. Today is an incredible day. Yes, it's a crazy day for Bicocca. I'm sorry for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm so happy to have a little talk about this very interesting book. As in all experience in museums, also in the experience of books, I used to look for in the book or in a museum something that has to do with me or my experience. So when Alberto Garlandini was the first to introduce to me this book, sharing the information of this publication, I immediately downloaded it and read it. And from the title, Ecomuseum and Climate Change, what has to do with me and with my museums, that is a university museum. Well, the thing interesting is that I found a lot of things about my museum and my experience in this book, because the thing is, as Nunzia said before, our museum is a new kind of museum. She talked about an open museum, but we can call it also an extended museum, like Alberto defined in this book, or a diffused museum, as in many other books, this kind of museum is defined. Why in the university we have a diffused museum, and which are the characteristics that put together what this book says with our museums? Well, the idea is exactly to create something that is created by a community, such as in the Ecomuseum, and the diffused museum, as the Ecomuseums are, is something that was born and created in the 70s. They are both rooted in the new museology and the idea of Andrea Emiliani and Freddy Drugman, that firstly in Italy talk about the diffused museum, is the idea to involve an entire landscape as an object of a museum. So in our case, the landscape of Bicocca doesn't seem to be so meaningful in the discourse of Ecomuseum and Climate Change. But the idea is to create a museum that has to connect the different parts of our communities, that is done by the community of the university and the students and the researchers and the teachers and all the personnel that work in the university, that can in some way through this museum know and share their experience in a participatory way. This museum has been just inaugurated. Well, to be honest, hasn't been inaugurated, and it will never be inaugurated. And because more than a space is a process that tries to connect, as in the process of creation of Ecomuseum, collections that are present and researches and many other activities and visions present in the university that can be a common field where to work. In this recent month, our university is involved in a very huge, important project called the MUSA, Multi-Layered Urban Sustainability Project, that put attention toward the aspects of sustainability, how a university can be sustainable. And in the field of research, of course, this part is really, really studied, but also in practice activities. And what we can do in this museum to be active in this kind of background? Well, for example, we try to connect activities and to share these activities with the external world of university. University recently had a new space that is a garden, and in this garden, the different researchers are working on plants and insects, and we facilitate the population of the neighborhood and also of the city to visit this garden and to know how this garden can be relevant for the city and for a little action also towards the sustainability in this specific place. Well, just to come back to the book and strictly on the book, well, I found one thing that a bit disappointed me. That is to put as something that are to be opposite, eco-museums and traditional museums. Well, in the middle, there are many experiences of museum, and this kind of hybridization, such as our experience of the diffuse museum, we think that is one of these kind of hybrid that have a lot to do with the experience of Ecomuseum, the community and the center, the collection, important, but something that has to connect and create discussion about the collection itself. The discourse of social justice that has to be promoted in the museum, and all the elements that we can find in the new definition of ICOM of museum, that are really, really well represented in this kind of museum that sometimes are called radical, such as something a bit weird, but maybe weird could mean also useful for the contemporaneity. And we hope to be weird, active, radical, and active also in activities for the promotion of new sensitivity to the issues related to climate change. So I stop because I don't want to waste the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sorry. Grazie. Thank you very much, Rita, for your interesting contribution, and thank you very much also for the big job that you are doing here in the University of Bicocca for the development of the extending museums. As you say, diffuse museums, we have to define what is the right noun, but definitely the project is very interesting, and I think that the work that you are doing, it's very interesting, and in the future we can see the result. Concerning what you say, I partially agree about what you said at the end of your contribution. The main point for us was that we have to make a choice. we have to select how we want to, we have to take the decision on how to tackle this important issue. And anyway, I agree when you say that many things, we missed many things that can be tackled when we talk about the SDGs and the climate action. But this is a first, as we are repeating from the beginning of this event, this is just a starting point. This is not the real point. This is the starting point for investigating in a different way these issues. Our interest is to be able to open a debate, maybe also also developing a new publication in the future that can help us to investigate much better this topic. It is important out but that we are completely sure it will be still important in the future. So maybe in the future we can start thinking about a new product where other topics can be considered. Okay, Jacopo. Last but not least, as we say, Jacopo Bencini is from an NGO. He works for Italian Climate Network. And we are very happy to have you here with your comments, because you come from another world. You are not in the museum and eco-museum field, but you are in some way connected on this topic because you and your organization work a lot on the climate action and climate change. So please.
Thank you very much, Nunzia, and thank you for inviting the Italian Climate Network to this book launch. I have to say that it has been a true pleasure reading the book recently, also because as an NGO we usually do not we do not tackle museums as part of our work, even though after reading the book I have the feeling we should. And I know that this connection between Milano-Bicocca, your research team, and us originated from contacts with the coordinator of our education department, Maria De Pasquale, who I think is there at Bicocca right now. And I think, Maria, we should work a bit on that. So as Italian Climate Network, we are an NGO specialized in monitoring the international process, international negotiations under the UNFCCC on climate change, so climate mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage related to climate adverse effects. And we are also very active in the dissemination and popularization of climate change matters and everything related to climate in schools in Italy and in universities around Italy. So definitely, I think this event could be a linking point between the work of your research team again and the university and what we do. And actually, I have found a very strict link when it comes to ACE, which is an acronym that in English stands for Action for Climate Empowerment under the United Nations Framework for Climate Change. I have found linkages to this in the chapter written by Harry McGee, which I already knew for his amazing work with museums and eco-museums and the mainstreaming of sustainability policies in your field. And as I said, we work a lot on Action for Climate Empowerment, and there have been several decisions and policy papers, let's say policy decisions adopted over the years under the United Nations, aiming at actually, again, mainstreaming climate policies through all possible ways, in all possible ways, through all possible languages. And as Italian Climate Network, we are somehow of an informal contact point even for our ministry in Italy in terms of developing together these new languages and understanding how to actually get to reach people outside of our climate bubble. This was not easy, yet crucial concerning young people before Fridays for Future and the whole Greta movement in 2018, 2019. Now it is fundamental to build interlinkages and intergenerationality because young people are somehow aware and into the thing since some year, but people aged 40, 50 or more still somehow very often have some difficulties in entering the topic because it's something we are not used to or we were not used to until 10 to 15 years ago. So in that sense, looking back at decisions under the United Nations where museums, and in this case eco-museums and open-air museums, are play a key role in building this climate empowerment on territories, then it's definitely something we should work on and collaborate as NGOs and civil society with realities such as the many eco-museums that we have also here in Italy and around Europe. I very much agree with some of the key messages of the book, such for instance as the importance in this kind of museums in terms of positive transformation of territories. I myself live in an eco-museum area in the province of Florence in Italy. Actually, I'm also a councillor in a municipality which was a funder of an eco-museum here. And this positive transformation has to go through some interactive challenges, let's say, when it comes to explaining to people what we are doing and linking all these high-level topics, if we want to say that, such as climate mitigation, climate adaptation, to the real life of people on territories. And I have been experiencing myself in my own experience how difficult that could be. But eco-museums compared to traditional museums in the old definition, if we want to say that, also according to the new definitions by ICOM, are more dynamic, could be more dynamic, and they live together with the territory and the people living their territory, and they evolve with the people. And in that sense, I think it could be interesting to understand and to also ask us somehow philosophical question, how should we understand the ideas of conservation, the idea of heritage in a world that it's changing so fast, and in a world that is experiencing changes that are happening so fast and to which, well, at least to many of them, we should get used to and adapt somehow, as climate change, as we know, is a problem that cannot be stopped, but can only be somehow mitigated or relented somehow. Moreover, again, eco-museums bring a local perspective into the topics of conservation, heritage, and territory. And in this sense, it could be also interesting to reverse the process and understand how to bring these local voices and this local need to protect the environment people are actually living in to the higher levels of politics, which could be quite challenging, of course. I also very much agree with the idea in the book that eco-museums bring development, and not just in terms of jobs, not just in terms of the dynamics that they could bring on the territory, but also in terms of how to build a development which respects nature, which respects the climate, and what do we intend for development, again, if we want to make it a philosophical question of meaning. And I think that the link, again, which is very clear in the book between the role of eco-museums and the SDGs, and I would add, and the Paris Agreement at the state level, is essential and key in this very historic moment. More and more we need to empower this local knowledge and to build linkages with the national level. One of the questions in the book that I very liked is how can these eco-museums help reverse the trend? But I would like to reverse the question: how can we as civil society promote this new vision of understanding the nature you're living, understand the social environment in which you live in, and the linkages with nature and the climate. A discussant before me underlined that climate change actually was not that key in terms of an established topic into the book, but I'm not sure whether I agree, and I really thank you, Nunzia, for answering that, because inserting climate change as part of the vision of this new field, let's say, of researching the interaction between eco-museums and climate change is itself climate action somehow, if we read it from the point of view of climate empowerment. because it was simply because it wasn't there until some years ago, simply because it wasn't there. And that's already positive from our point of view. It helps raising awareness through bottom-up approaches and through the role of people. And in this sense, we can talk perhaps about a sort of marriage between aesthetics, sustainability, history, heritage, and by sustainability, we of course intend climate change. 380 and something more pages of new narratives. I would like to close by saying that when I started reading this book, I was not entirely sure what I would have said in this meeting, in this presentation today, as we are very used to monitoring negotiations, of course. We are very used to high-level language and very nerdy language, if you allow me to, in terms of climate change mitigation, adaptation, carbon capture and storage, and all this kind of technical language that, even though we come from politics, I mean, I myself, I come from a political science background, as many of us, we are getting used to that, which is very mechanic, which is very technical, which is very technologic, if we want. But we need to understand that to build this empowerment of people, we also need all languages. And I realized that some of the great examples and good practices that are mentioned in the book are somehow already the carriers of new languages to bring the same message, which is the message of sustainability and the message to actually the need to take care of the planet where we were born on. Again, it's a matter of languages, it's a matter of philosophical questions we want and we need to ask ourselves. But I think that there is, on top of everything, there is a bridge which needs to be built between this kind of conversation, what we see at the UN every year, what we see in schools, and the way we explain climate change to young people, and in this sense to build together a narrative which could fit every kind of conversation and not just silos conversations divided per academic background or experience in cultural heritage or cultural work somehow. So again, I thank you very much as Italian Climate Network and on behalf of all the other volunteers and staff for inviting us to this book presentation. And I do think that this field of research needs civil society, needs other voices to complete this new narrative we would like to build together, and we are here in any case to help. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jacopo, for your contribution. I'm really happy to hear that you think that we need to start to collaborate. This is exactly what we say when I talked the first time with Maria. Thank you, Maria, to be here. And so definitely, this is the reason why we invite you to these events. I'm also agree and on another point in particular, but maybe we can return on something that was said by the discussants also at the end of the presentation of the author's contribution. But I absolutely agree about the language, the necessity to work also on the language. It's very important, and this is the reason why we are trying to create contact with other organizations that are working on this topic, because we need to find a common language that can be more clear for people, for the target of our contributions. So we need to work a lot on that point. I understood what you say, and we share I share your point of view. Thank you again to be here, and I think that we are in time, we are perfectly in time, so we can start hearing some contribution from the authors, and then we can try to reason about how we can work in the future. So the first contribution is from Raul Dal Santo, that is here, and Douglas Worth. Hi, Douglas. Can you see Douglas? Is connected?
Douglas?
Right, I think I finally figured out where to turn things on. So I need to open up. Are you, Nunzia, are you running the slides or am I? I can do that if you want.
Yeah, we are sharing your slides.
Okay. All right, so, okay, there's all sorts of pop-ups that are jumping out at me as well here. And let me just grab my notes. Thank you to everybody who's been involved in this project. It has been an incredible honor and privilege to be part of this, and especially for me to work with Raul. We've been actually working together for some years now with eco-museum issues, but it has been a special treat to work on this project with the original conference and all of its materials that came out of it, and now through the book. And so I am thrilled to be part of it. And so we've got several slides here. There we go. Okay, so Raul and I have worked on a project that has had a number of components. One of them is looking at this model that I had developed some years ago called the inside-outside model. And he has taken the model and actually applied it over a period of the last several years in the Ecomuseum in Parabiaggio. And so that has been the second part. We've got two chapters in the book, one on the model, one on the case study. And so we're going to cover some of that territory today. And Raul is going to also talk about, in addition to the case study, the eco-heritage project. Okay. All right, and so here you'll see my inside-outside model, and I'm just going to leave it there as I make these remarks. So essentially, I've been a museologist for more than 45 years now, based in Toronto, Canada, and my professional focuses were interpretive planning and integrated audience research. For the last half of my career, I have focused on the cultural dimensions of the Anthropocene. So specifically, I've explored the values, the motivations, skills, methods, etc., that are needed to help catalyze meaningful cultural change that is relevant to our moment in history. The contribution in this book really is this tool, and it's called the inside-outside model. And despite its looking rather complex, it's very simple idea. It's basically looking at the museum and what it has control over directly, and what it can do with that control to leverage activities across the living culture. And so one of the things it features is this gap between the living culture, which happens in daily life, and institutionalized culture, which often happens inside institutions. And it's part of the problem of traditional museums is that they really have difficulty reaching out and impacting the larger world beyond. But it's we're particularly looking at forces like climate change and loss of biodiversity and species loss. And these are fundamentally reshaping our world. And when we consider that these worrying trends are not the problem that need to be fixed, but rather symptoms of greater and deeper dysfunction, then we come face to face with the reality that it is the culture that we actually embrace and live that is the driver of these things that are becoming these such dangerous trends. And we need to be able to adapt culturally to live in the world that we now occupy. So as our world changes, human cultures must adapt, and they strive to, as they strive to maintain stability and to address the needs of people. Now, museums can help these processes of adaptation to occur if they develop the skills and motivations to undertake this work. To do this will be a challenge, especially because they weren't designed to do this kind of work, impact-oriented work. Ecomuseums, on the other hand, were designed in this kind of way and do have a tradition of focusing on the well-being of a region, including the health of residents in relationship to each other and to the natural world. And they see that process as a very participatory one that engages and involves all people, not just in their leisure time, but rather in their lives. So the inside-outside model exists to remind museum practitioners of what is needed in this turbulent time of increasing climate change. Is that we really need a living culture that is co-creating change that will move all stakeholders in this collaboration towards dynamically stable well-being. In addressing the challenge of cultural well-being on our complex planet, context is everything, and most essential is to acknowledge that we have entered the time of the Anthropocene, which is a geological epoch, the exact details of which are still being negotiated. But what is critical to acknowledge is that in recent decades, humanity has entered a time in which its values, goals, actions, and societal systems have become the number one force shaping Earth's natural systems. Increasing climate change is big, but it's only one of many worrying trends like biodiversity loss, ocean acidification, extinctions, deforestation, and more. The implication is that without significant change to culture, across local and global levels, the planet's natural systems will become dangerously and destructively destabilized. It's an unprecedented situation for our species. It's worth remembering that human cultures have always adapted to change in the world. The impacts of human activity, both intended and unintended, have historically been quite local. But more recently, as humans used energy from fossil fuels to pursue ever greater ambitions, the negative side effects and negative, largely unintended side effects have grown exponentially. It's now clear that scaling the use of fossil-based energy has distinct limitations on our finite planet. But there are viable solutions, but they will be disruptive. The Anthropocene is perhaps the biggest and ultimate test of the power of human creativity to envision a future in which our species can thrive, ethically and equitably, without sending our planet into the sixth great extinction, which is the point at which we currently find ourselves. Many traditional museums plan for program outputs. These are the products that are designed for leisure time consumption by those who have the time and resources to visit museums. But often these exhibits and programs stop short of planning for co-creative impacts that ripple across the larger living culture, adapting and changing to an ever-evolving world. Addressing climate change and fostering a culture of sustainability are amongst the most pressing challenges of our times. If museums and ecomuseums can see themselves as catalysts of cultural change and adaptation, then we need new tools, skills, and priorities that are oriented to creating impacts in the larger living culture, and in concert with the stakeholders that live across this living culture of ours. It'll be a large challenge to bridge the gap between the living culture and the institutionalized culture. It will require deep reflection, dialogue, empathy, shared vision, and co-creative actions. Museums can't do it alone. They will require the creativity that can be found in every corner of human endeavor. The good news is that humanity in all of its rich diversity has these capacities. So that concludes my remarks, and I will pass the slideshow on to Raul. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. It was an honor to work with you. In this book is yes, is a goals, but especially is a step in a process that, and I show you what happened in Parabiago in my Ecomuseum after the work with Douglas and the other authors of the book. First of all, we made an analysis of impact. Then we wrote 2 chapters in the book. And then in my Ecomuseum, we wrote a new midterm Ecomuseum action plan. And also we translated in Italian the 2 chapters. At the European level, something happened with the Eco-Heritage project. With this project, some useful tools have been created both for European and worldwide ecomuseums. So we have case studies, toolkit, learning modules. About the first goal of this Eco-Heritage project, there is the analysis of 13 European case studies. For each of these cases, for example, La Ponte Ecomuseum in Spain, we wrote characteristics, processes, commitment on development goals, and so on. So in the website, you can see this work on about Europe. Also, we wrote tools, a toolkit for Ecomuseum. They are useful tools for Ecomuseum that start their work, but also that want to improve their work. 2 of these tools refers to the inside-outside impact model. This is the first tool, Ecomuseum Evaluation and Impact Monitoring. And this is the other, Ecomuseum Planification. The last goal of the Eco-Heritage project concern a specific training module about Ecomuseum and sustainability. The learning module provides information and suggestion regarding the use and implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals in the Ecomuseums, both with the suggestion of Henry McGuy and Douglas Worth with his inside-outside impact model. And I also want to thank Douglas and the other author because of their suggestion, their relevant suggestion for this European Eco-Heritage project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raul. Thank you, Raul, and thank you, Douglas. It's much better if we interrupt this one. Okay. Okay, I can ask to Clark Cooper. Okay, she's here. Perfect. Okay, I can share your PPT if you want.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes, okay. See, okay. Okay.
I can just see the bottom of the screen, so that's great. Thank you. Well, thank you. It's such a great moment to be invited to be part of this very special event, even though I'm quite a long way away in Scotland. The Catran Ecomuseum, which is what I'm going to talk about, has a chapter in this wonderful book, Ecomuseums and Climate Change, describing our Museum of Rapid Transition programme, which we launched in 2021. The objective of the programme is to engage people with our natural and cultural heritage in ways that help mobilise them for climate action and transition to more regenerative lifestyles. In a nutshell, we aim to show how the story of our past can help guide the story of our future. Nunzia, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, that would be great. The programme, now able to continue this year and next, thanks to new funding from our National Lottery Heritage Fund, which recognised the importance of the work that we were doing in climate action, co-designs heritage-based activities with our communities that aim to show that the best way to tackle these crises is to recognise that all things are connected and that we need to fully understand our interdependency with all life on Earth and transform how we live before it's too late. I believe that the capacity for ecomuseums to help people look back to clues to the forward, together with their place-based nature approach, it's unique and powerful opportunities to help mainstream this me-to-we worldview. In essence, that can tell a new story of place. Stories shape how we understand our place in it and our ability to change it. And stories help us how things can be different. And telling this new story, whilst the future comes out of the past, the future is unwritten, we can change the story. So I think probably a very powerful thing that ecomuseums do right now. So the activities that I think ecomuseums should be developing are all about creating new stories that bring us together, enabling us to connect across our differences, challenge the status quo, lighting up the paths for change, and helping us imagine that anything is possible. Next slide, please, Nunzia. And with all the diversity present in the ecomuseum movement, the opportunities to show that, as John Muir famously said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to anything acts in the universe of limitless. So here are 3 examples of new stories that we're beginning to try to tell here in Tayside in Scotland. So picking up on Michael Jacobson's point, we're developing a new exhibition about past periods of rapid transition in food production to support a new regional initiative trying to work out how to feed Tayside through the climate crisis and the rapid transition to more localised supply chains we will need to design when to succeed. Secondly, we're helping to develop a new public engagement programme for a major watershed restoration project in the Ecomuseum geography. Our role is to bring a paleo-environmental perspective to how past human-made changes in the landscape of the watershed have driven biodiversity collapse and made the impact of extreme weather events worse. Our hope is that by involving local people in collecting this paleo-environmental data, so that we can tell this past story in a way that is relevant to the climate and biodiversity crisis we face now, will help generate the development of a new story about how this important watershed is restored. And thirdly, we're part of a core group setting up Scotland's first bioregional initiative, Bioregioning Tayside. Bioregions are, in my view, very similar to ecomuseums in that they reframe how we see our place and therefore offer the opportunity to tell a new story about that place. Looking through a bioregional lens transforms shires and cities into biomes and watersheds, inspiring us to reperceive our interdependence with the natural world and bring us back into a healthy, balanced coexistence with each other. In essence, it's a new name for a very old idea, as all humans understood this up until a few hundred years ago. And I do wonder whether another activity that might be developed in the future might not be to either ecomuseums setting up bioregions or teaming up with existing bioregional initiatives all over the world. Andrew Sims, who coined the phrase Museum of Rapid Transition, reminds us that museums are physical manifestations of civilization's collective memories, inventories of the traces left in us by the past. They are also vital stories of change in our behavior, culture, economy, and technology. And by showing us how much we have changed before, museums remind us of our ability to change now and help us learn the lessons of the past to illuminate the paths ahead. They're more important now than ever as we face a challenge unprecedented in scale and speed to prevent the loss of the climate and biosphere, which gave civilization a home. So thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I don't know if you hear me. Did you hear me from home? I'm sorry, because I forgot to switch on the microphone. Okay. Okay, Edo, do you want to, are you ready? Can you talk now?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
Okay.
Very, very quick.
Yes,
So-
no, non ce l'avevo.
Can you listen?
Yes, of course. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Well, unfortunately, I could not join you at Bicocca University. Anyway, many thanks for invitation. It is like I'm there with you. I would have greeted you in person, especially Peter Davis, whom I had met years ago, always at Bicocca. So now I make a detour, a dribble. I would skip just to illustrate the best practices of Ecomuseum Artesano, which are already written in the book. I would like to come to conclusions immediately, just to save time. Well, first of all, we should acquire awareness of the existence of Ecomuseum realities, as the Ecomuseum marks the transition from the single perception of a place of a theme to an overall vision. Further on, territorial heritage, especially the perception we have of it, changes from day to day and changes in relation to the dynamism of reality. And our reality is somewhat problematic regarding the climate challenge. So, if the Ecomuseum is an expression of a collaborative will of local actors in taking care of their territorial heritage, so I think one of the main goal of the Ecomuseum is just to take care, and we should act in consequence. But here lies the greatest difficulty. Generally speaking, everyone agrees on tackling the climate challenge. In reality, however, few work to bring our land sustainable. One of the major difficulties we should face is the lack of adherence to the requested actions. Why this? Because action remains on generalities. Instead, the action should be set into the reality of small daily action. I think this is the most important key point, the daily action. Big challenges scare. Small ones, on the contrary, can be faced with more relief and resolved as well. We should give people the satisfaction of achieving some small results. We must continue on this path and try to involve people in their daily lives. All these small actions should be defined and calibrated on the specific needs of the Ecomuseum, taken in themselves, if we want to be realistic. So a special recommendation. It's a sort of invitation to launch a proposal to create a platform to explore the most widespread and parallel critical points of the situations of all ecomuseums all over the world. Because starting from these critical issues, it would be then possible to speak a unique language on everyday life, which is the language spoken by ecomuseums. Moreover, to ascertain possible convergence of interest within the ecomuseum panorama in order to face them with a common intention, step by step. Because proceeding step by step in the everyday life, that is, according to me, the key point to unify the actions of all ecomuseums all over the world. I have been very short because I want to save time, but I would say once again that we should consider small daily actions regarding everyday life. We should proceed step by step. We should give the people the satisfaction of achieving some small results. Otherwise, it would be frustrating. And I think it would be a good thing to create a world platform where all ecomuseums just could underline their critical points. And starting from these critical points, we can then just face them in a more realistic way. So this is a sort of invitation. I think that if you'd like to know the best practice of Ecomuseum Artesana, they are already written in the book. So I won't just waste time. This is my proposal, to create a platform starting from everyday life, because if we want to face the climate challenge, we haven't the force, the strength to face them, generally speaking, the great ones. We should consider the small ones. Many thanks to all of you, and in particular to Nunzia Borelli, Raul Del Santo, and Peter Davis, because they have done a very, very good work. And I think that their invitation is just to proceed on this road. That's why I made this proposal. Thank you very much to all of you. I can't hear your voice. Probably there is a problem with the audio. Is it mine or yours?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Edo. Sorry. For your contribution. It was very nice and very useful. We are going very fast because, as you say, there are many contributions, and so we would like to ask to Gelson to take the word if he is ready. Are you ready, Gelson? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Well, first, I would like to apologize for my English. It's an immense pleasure to be here and the launch of the book Ecomuseums and Climate Change, having it if remotely. I would hate to be with you in Milan and hug each and one of you personally. I would like to thank Aprenda, Associação Brasileira de Ecomuseus e Museus Comunitários, for the initial nomination to represent in 2021 at Pre-COP 26. And thank you for inviting Nunzia Borelli, Peter Davis and Raul Dal Santo to participate in this beautiful and fundamental book. Peter, I appreciate your presentation about the book. Indeed, I had the honor of writing the chapter Climate Action of Ecomuseu Ilha Grande, Brazil, for the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm through some images quickly for the just for overview. The experience of the pre-COP conference and writing the book helped strengthen the role of Ecomuseu Ilha Grande in climate action, contributing to a broader view of the set of the project and how they are articulating in different issues and objectives. The articulation of teams in interdisciplinary way, as well as common action between a university and community, is the basis of our mission. The next, please. The mission of Ecomuseu Ilha Grande is to incorporate the community as the subject of the process of conservation and sustainable development of the territory of Ilha Grande through the preservation, research, valorization, and dissemination of history, memory, culture, and identity places, as well in the natural, tangible, and intangible heritage, promoting reflection and conscious action. The Ecomuseu Ilha Grande is both Ecomuseu and University Museum, a unit of the pro-rectory and the extension and culture of this State University of Rio de Janeiro, UERJ, Universidade do Estado do Rio de Janeiro, which carries out preservation, investigation, and dissemination activities of the environment, history, and social-cultural life on the island. In comprehensive of section, Museu do Cárcere, Prison Museum, Museu do Meio Ambiente, Environment Museum, Parque Botânico, Botanical Park, and the Centro Multimedia Center. Its territory is island itself. The local population is made up resident of Vila dos Rios and the other communities on the island. Develops research, teaching, and station activities. Next, Nunzia, you can test and test in that over and over, please. Good. A powerful instrument used by the Ecomuseu Ilha Grande, the actions and projects in the 21st agenda is the SDG together and separately and fundamental for us. Briefly, we like the following project for the book. And next, please. Is the park multimedia center, please, next. It's very complex, Ecomuseu. Museu do Cárcere, Prison Museum, and the sede in Living Center. My team, please. Next. Next, please. Well, this is project Recycle Ecomuseum that works with the use of various solid waste, but mainly PET. Next. Marilda Caiares is our artisan principal. Project Marine, the biodiversity of Ilha Grande Bay, marine biology, a way to tell the stories of the sea, monitor marine monitoring of Ilha Grande Bay, like Monitor Sea, a joke, research the marine life. Next. Same, next, please. And community bias, oh, please, wait. I return, please, great. The development of new technologies of forward. What development of new technologies of mills? What is the performance in ecological themes and climate actions? Do our contribute to knowledge and solutions to the climate crisis, aiming to integral development and environment balance? Next, please. Ilha Grande is an UNESCO World Heritage Site. Paraty em Ilha Grande. Culture and Biodiversity from 2019 by B. Outstanding example of traditional human settlement and land and also use that is representative of cultures on human interaction with the environment, especially when it becomes vulnerable due to the impact of irreversible change. Human groups live alongside the lush landscape and exploit the natural resources, land and water, forming an interaction between culture and nature. Traditional community Caiçara based their activity on the use of land and sea. We have a great responsibility in raising awareness and training of everyone in the community, especially the youngest, so that we achieve the harmonious development and the relationship between man and the nature and the environment balance. We carry out immediate visit, itinerant exhibition and in sciences, presentation in school and communities. We develop and take new technologies in health, education and tourism guidelines to these communities. What have we do so far? Please, next. Production of diverse content about COVID-19 prevention, Caiçara culture and other traditional cultures, communities, marine biodiversity of Ilha Grande Bay, fauna, flora, Ilha Grande, history and memories of prison of Ilha Grande and other museum projects and action, realization for life with different teams related to Ilha Grande, partnership with our school, Ilha Grande, with permanent action in community school, partnership and pedagogical projects such as the organization and mediation of class visit in Vila do Gil. Next, please. How does the Ecomuseu contribute, or can it contribute to the integration between environmental protection, tackling climate change, human development, and quality of life? Brazil is experiencing a moment of hope with the new Lula government. Since the 2016 call of the election of an extreme right-wing government, we have faced the withdrawal of rights, the lack of resources for social and cultural investment, and dismantling of environment protection, resulting in the genocide of indigenous peoples, as well and during the pandemic from COVID-19. According to research of the more than 7,000 deaths, about I motion and remember this Bolsonaro's genocide.
Okay.
Today, Brazil is back, but there is much to be done. Ecomuseu must continue, and next, please, and fully in their social community function. I'm finished. In must really and community of creative resilience and resistance of communities in overcoming current problems and future prospects. The vast majority of Ecomuseums and community museums, especially community museums, face structural deficits, great material difficulties, such as large research and infrastructure. However, there is hope. It's not and will not be simple, but it's necessary to turn the crisis into an opportunity. There is not made formula or instruction manual. Each museum must find the easy way. Its way there, be creative, do what you know well, and above all, be supportive. Next, please. I show, next. You show the slide, the next slides, and in many actions to do Ecomuseu Ilha Grande and the last year, 2022. Forward, Nilza, please. is a very important extreme weather events in frequent such as torrential rains in Ilha Grande in 2 days early April 2022 with around 6,000 millimeters. The rains resulted in several falling trees, rocks, in landslides and slides and flooding, prevent access to the Colony Road, only road in the Ilha Grande, limiting communication by the sea. In addition to the slides in populated areas, some communities we have affected. Vila do Abrão, Aventureiro, 4 houses destroyed, 20 interdicted, including the INEA headquarters, Provetá, 32 houses interdicted, Araçatiba, Praia da Longa, Praia Vermelha, Palmas, Itaguaçu Beach was destroyed, and there were 3 deaths. Next, please.
Gelson, we have to go to the conclusion, please.
Oh, sorry, in conclusion.
Yeah.
The next, please. Is some help and the community and Ecomuseu to the population and the Mount Care in Ilha Grande. Please, next. Boat rental to transport the community of Vila dos Rios to the Ecomuseu Ilha Grande and SEADs. Next. Actions with different sectors of the state and the government and university solve the problem. But the actions and projects have not stopped. Next. You see, any actions cannot Ecomuseu Ilha Grande proceed along the last year. Next. 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 Oh, wait. Mariam, one more.
It's
one
okay.
More slide.
No, here?
No. Before. Yeah, aí. This is festival, traditional communities, and we live to Ilha Grande, Quilombo, aldeia indígena, indigenous peoples, Afro descendants, and something. The Ilha Grande Bay is amazing, awesome. My experience is incredible. Forward, next. Any actions realize, and por fim, we inviting to knowledge Ecomuseu Ilha Grande internet, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, sites, enfim. Thank you. The internet can actually bring us close together. Together we are strong, locally and globally. Distant but unit. Distante mas unidos. Distantes mas unidos. I hope.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gelson. Thank you very much. Also because I know that you did some problem in the last period. So thank you to be here for your presentation. Okay, we can ask to Ginevra. Thank you. Yeah. Ginevra is here. She's here, so she's easy for her. Thank you, Ginevra, to be here today.
Direttamente da qua. Schiaccio questo. I just hit. Okay. So thank you very much for this invitation and for this opportunity to be here. I'm very happy to have contributed to such an important study. Okay. No. Grazie. Thank you. My study examined the convergence of aesthetics and sustainability, focusing especially on the role that contemporary art played within eco-museums addressing the 2030 SDGs in relation to climate change. And this study stems from an increasing convergence that had place over the last decades, demonstrating that this convergence between aesthetics and sustainability is a growing field of research that has seen the responses of artists, art institutions, curators, and currently is involving also eco-museums, asking them to take center stage. Some instances of my studies show how eco-museums responded to different SDGs. For instance, in the northern part of Italy, we have Ecomuseo Valsugana in Trentino, that acted addressing the SDG number 15 and the Life on Land SDG, organizing a symposium of sculpture called Stones of Water, a granite sculpture symposium that aimed to reknit the thread of a lost sculpture tradition by recovering ancient knowledge and restoring it through the language of art. And for this symposium, the Ecomuseum engaged 5 sculptors to work on some of the stones on the surrounding territory called Kepena location. And the outcome was the creation of a small open-air museum and the creation of a route to follow the Brenta River in order to leave an action that participant and visitor could engage with also later on. Another instance of the Ecomuseum of Rimini in Emilia-Romagna in the center part of Italy, they work on the SDG number 10, reducing inequalities. They launched a call for artists residencies called Public Art Social Portraits. They wanted to create portraits of elderly population living in the proximity of this Osa Park in Rimini. And they wanted to create a transgenerational dialogue between people of the place and elder people. Another example is the Ecomuseum of Casentino in Tuscany that worked on SDG number 16, so peace, justice, and strong institution. They launched a project from 2016 to 2020 called Stand Up for Africa, Contemporary Art for Human Rights, in which they involved and engaged artists and other migrant artists such as Unida Harry. And they asked him to create this carpet knitting words related to human rights, such as peace, such as unity, courage, fraternity, and freedom. And they use the contemporary art as an instrument of social action, as a universal means to raise awareness, to promote and educate the territory on the themes of human rights, the themes of welcome, the one of coexistence, as well as the knowledge and valorization of the local cultural heritage. So data on Italian and European eco-museums of my study provide a strong example of how many eco-museums have focused on the connection between sustainability and aesthetics. So about actions to develop in the future for capitalizing on the legacy of this experience, I would say that first we would need to collect data about the impact that aesthetics plays to vehiculate sustainability in the eco-museum communities. And second, for sure, we should try to establish indicators in order to measure whether the impact met the result in relation to the 2030 SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You were perfect, perfectly in time. Thank you very much. Okay, we can fast give the word to Jamie and Karen. Okay, we can switch off this one. Okay. Yeah. Okay, interrupt. Okay, hi Jamie. Thank you to be here. Thank you very much. Hi Jamie, hi Karen. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to see you.
We're very happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to present together to a total of 5 minutes and no more, hopefully. And so first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to be with you all. Thank you for the invitation to be part of the book and part of this discussion at large. My colleague Jamie Brown, Research Fellow at the University of St Andrews, and I have been working together on community museums, eco-museums for the past 8 years or so now, working mainly with European partners, but also notably in the Global South. And so what we would like to mention briefly today is this aspect of what we've been doing that has been showcased in chapter 10 of the book on climate change and eco-museums. And really all I want to say is that the invitation to be part of this very special book prompted us to really think more critically and more theoretically about what it was that we have been doing in collaboration with the communities, especially in Costa Rica, and especially the indigenous communities in Costa Rica, as that relates to questions of the climate crisis and the actions that we were engaging in there with them and on their terms. Can we have the next slide, please? So before I hand over to Jamie, it's just to emphasize, as you all know, that we've seen that in this context that eco-museums, community museums do facilitate interdisciplinary collaboration. In our case, we worked with heritage professionals, but also archaeology and sustainable development practitioners and academics, between these people, between local communities, local governments, and also social enterprises, and that all of these can work together for different forms of sustainable development. So to our minds, this book, this beautifully presented book, and thank you for all of the hard work that went into it, provides a really lovely opportunity to showcase the best practices and the real value of such methodologies deriving from eco-museums. I'll hand over to Jamie now.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'd just like to reiterate what Karen mentioned. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share this with everyone. It's been a pleasure to see everyone's contributions and to take part. As Karen, just to follow up on Karen's conversation and discussion there, we do feel that the urgency of addressing climate change and its impact on Indigenous communities cannot be overstated, and such as the aftermath and community-led recovery of the hurricane-induced flooding that occurred in Reykjavik, Costa Rica in 2017. The experiences of Indigenous communities mentioned in Chapter 10, such as Baruca, San Vicente and Reykjavik in Costa Rica, demonstrate the need for action, collaboration and the preservation of their living heritage, showcasing traditional knowledge, community practices and the cultural expressions that are passed down through generations. We must ensure that our young people not just learn but utilise the knowledge passed down from elders with a seat at the table when decisions are made and discussions are held. If we can go to the next slide, please. By sharing these eco-museum and community museum practices and concepts, we invest in the resilience of these communities and the overall sustainable future of our planet. It is the responsibility of us all, from academics to museum professionals, community leaders, decision and lawmakers, to empower community-led networks such as the Museum Comunitarios Network, based across Latin America, to be platforms for community voices to be heard, fostering their sense of place, resilience, needs and wants, but also building community agency, communities shaping their own sustainable future in their own terms. Let me go to the next slide. And finally, we just wanted to showcase this fantastic photograph of our young people working within our research in the Reykjavik Community Museum based in Costa Rica. Thank you so much, everyone.
And before we finish, we might just say a very special thank you to Peter Davis, who has been who's been the linchpin in most of the work that we've done together. And we just want to say a special thank you to Peter for everything that you've done for us and all the different ways that you've supported us, as well as supported this book and ecomuseum networks globally. So thanks for that.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we all wanted to say thank you to Peter again. Okay, now I can ask to Michela Rota. Michela is here, so we are very happy to. If you want to, you can sit down there. It's easy. Yes, it's easier. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I don't have a PowerPoint, so please pay attention to the message. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Raul, Nunzia, and Peter Davis for the invitation, and Peter for many review of the chapter. I'm happy to be here in this collective moment for a reflection and dialogue around the book's topics and for possible new path that we can share to improve what museums and ecomuseums can do for sustainability and sustainable development. I agree with the many statements and best practices that we have heard today. And in my book's chapter, I have written about also topics that could be considered to start a path or improve a path towards sustainable ecomuseums and museums. And also I've written about a research project called Musei Integrati with many outcomes that we are sharing little by little with the museum ecosystem. But today, in general, I want to put an attention. I have written in this chapter to push for more activist museums and ecomuseums for the environment and climate. And today I'd like to share a simple message, but that it's not clear and not so important for many. We are all involved in this topic of for the environment and climate change, but I believe that this message, that I'll explain later, is at the core for any possible improvement in that direction for climate change, sustainability, sustainable development. I recall the importance, most of all for ecomuseums. We already have examples about that, to strengthen their effort to protect and safeguard the local cultural and natural heritage. A concept highlighted with different words also in the ICOM resolution #1 on sustainability, acknowledging and reducing our environmental impact and carbon footprint, helping to help secure a sustainable future for all inhabitants, human and non-human. So this link between us and other human being on this planet is something that we have to put the attention again. And about culture, we have to be humble and investigate if the culture that we are protecting is a sustainable one or it's still related to an extractive culture. To start sending new messages and creating new solutions, new stories, new programs, new researches, and in the end to change our behaviors. And we'll reach improvements only if we'll start to act and reconnect with nature, and acknowledging that on this planet we have all the same rights, human and non-human, starting to recreate this bond, restore nature, safeguard biodiversity, and not less important, build a culture of non-violence and protect the most vulnerable. So I think this is the message. Yeah. and feeling and experiencing this connection can be a good starting point and to do something relevant for us and for the future generations. Using collections and objects, museums and ecomuseums can send new messages and activate new behaviors. And how museums can create this path to our sustainability and to the things that I've mentioned, it's all written in the books, because I think that in the book there are a lot of methodologies, best practices that can improve, but also we need to take moments for ourselves to reconnect with nature. It's not all important to write, share this moment, but also stay in nature and connect with nature, because we are really one. And just to finish, I urge you to read this book, not you, because I'm sure that you have the book and you have already read it, but also the people connected online. And to conclude, my compliments to the other author and also to the editor and to you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your contribution, and also to the work that the working group of ICOM on sustainability is doing. We have not said anything about that. I was thinking to say something before Henry, but I think that what you are doing is very important. So thank you very much for that. Okay, the last, we have now the presentation of Oscar, and then we will give you the word to Harry for adding something and for draw the conclusions. Yeah.
Oscar?
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno a te.
Buongiorno everyone. Hi. This is my presentation? Yes, no?
Just one moment.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the organization, Nuncia, Raúl, Peter Davis, and the other people. Could you pass the next slide, please? Thank you. The organization proposed 3 questions, and in this presentation I'm going to focus in the second one. Next, please. So, as Peter Davis showed before, in Spain there are around 119 ecomuseums. 92 are open. The other ones are closed. This is some data about how implement our ecomuseums the SDG. The more important factor is 4, 5, and 15 SDG objectives. But in this presentation, I'm going to focus in the case study of La Ponte. No, to start with this, I'm going to show some words about Utebarin. Please, next slide. Okay. Ecomuseums, like other museological typologies that promote community participation, proposed a change in the way of understanding the reason for being of museums in society. It was proposed to transform the museological process into a means of direct participation of the individual and the community, as well as to offer a tool for the integral development of heritage and territory. However, it was his social and democratic sense what made ecomuseums directly related to the idea of sustainability. The prefix eco refers to a concept of human ecology and the dynamic relationship that society establishes with its environment and the transformation processes of this. Therefore, the concept of ecomuseum, as created by Utebarin, is constructed by means of Greek word oikos, which makes the Ecomuseums a tool for sustainability local management strategies. For us, for me and for La Ponte, Ecomuseums, sustainability is a relationship of actors that is to say a system of human interrelation connected with the territory. Next, please. Thank you. Ecomuseums, as a typology and experience that promotes sustainability, encourage inhabitants to become aware, promote and participate in the protection and management of their territories, and, on the other hand, they propose a holistic vision of geoterritorial realities and interdisciplinary work. This, taking into the territorial, cultural, and economic policies of any potential region or municipality government, makes Ecomuseums a desirable element to implement as a political, social, and environmental strategy. However, the essence of Ecomuseums has a deeper spirit. Every activity of a social and cultural institution, such as Ecomuseums, generates or aims to propose a transformation in its social territorial reality. The sense we were aiming at is to raise citizens' awareness of their responsibility for their reality, which leads to the sustainable protection of their environmental. In the case study of La Ponte Ecomuseum has demonstrated it is precisely this. It's precisely this. The decade of work in La Ponte Ecomuseum that we have been carrying out in this community Ecomuseum in Asturias is that at the moment, the real endangered species in the rural world is the local inhabitant. Sustainability in ecomuseums, in our experience, does not lie in the parameters set by international, national, or regional entities, because there are exogenous to our territory, but in the awareness and responsibility of endogenous decision making. This is the main point. We believe, as put in the sentence, that we must understand ecomuseums with a network of people, ideas and reflection that are transformed into action. This supposes taking political position in the Aristotelical sense. In my case, I believe that we must move beyond materiality to focus on the interaction of networks of people and work. Next, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Oscar. Okay, thank you, Oscar. Thank you so much for being in time. Thank you very much and to answer to the question, just to one question. Thank you again. Okay, maybe we can ask Harry to give his contribution to one of the three questions, and then we can ask if there are some questions from public. If you agree, it's okay for you, Harry?
That's fine with me, yeah, thank you. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so I mean, just to say a few words, because I'll speak at the end for some conclusions. It's just to say a little bit about some of my own work and highlight some practical tools that we've been working on lately. So of course I contributed to the great Ecomuseums book, and it was a great project to work on. It was really a great honor to be included among the many authors, and of course writing chapters for a book is one of the best ways that we get our own ideas clear in our heads. It's really fantastic. And just to highlight a few of the other things I've been working on since the time of the pre-COP conference. So the Mobilising Museums for Climate Action is a toolkit that I'll talk about shortly. But then one of the other things I do quite a lot of is trying to help people really understand what the Sustainable Development Goals and targets are trying to do. because it's still quite early work for a lot of museums and many in the cultural sector, because sustainable development is quite new to them, less so in the eco-museum world. And I'll talk about some of these things shortly. But also to say is that one of the things which I notice again and again is that people talk about climate action, or they talk about climate change, climate action, sustainability and sustainable development as if they're all the same thing. And they're really not. They're really quite different in many ways. There's lots of ways to act on climate change that are very unfair for people. Often institutions who talk about sustainability are thinking about how their institution uses resources, and is really quite an internal activity. And sustainable development is much more than that. It's about all of these things together. And I just included there the logo for UN 75 because it's the 75th birthday of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And in a way, this year, and in a way it should be everywhere, but almost no one talks about it. And if we don't talk about human rights and people don't even know what rights they have, it'll be a miracle if they get them. And so it's really just to highlight this, that sustainable development goals are very much more than climate action or using resources carefully. They're about all of these things together. They're about intergenerational equity, but they're also much more as a program that is about involving more people, in fact, all people, in shaping the future, because the only way that we can have a strong public mandate for particular directions is if people are involved in shaping those directions. And so one of the great things which the SDGs do is to give us some goals. So one of the, because I worked in museums for a long time, is that museums, they're often quite heavy with having lots of rules, but less goals. So if museums don't have goals themselves, they need to find goals from somewhere else, and they need to find the right ones to work on. And so from the agenda, we have the aims, so, to end poverty and hunger, to ensure prosperous and fulfilling lives, to protect the planet for current and future generations, to support peace, and to deliver this through partnership. And we could just take those 5 commitments and just bring them into the museum sector and the eco-museum sector, and that would be brilliant. That would be fantastic. And I'll just highlight 2 projects I've been working on, and this is one that was done at the time of COP26. After the pre-COP conference, we had a competition. We gathered lots of ideas from around the world, and 8 of the ideas were shown in an exhibition at Glasgow Science Centre, which was the public-facing part of COP26. And I just love this photograph because it's a model from a Brazilian team their idea was for very small and very temporary museums. This was a model of the museum, and it looks across to where the climate change conference was. And I just love this kind of negotiation between the policy agendas, a creativity, and small, actions close to home. And this is part of the program for what we call Action for Climate Empowerment, which Jacopo mentioned earlier. As part of that project, we produced a website called Reimagining Museums for Climate Action, and we wrote this toolkit to really try to help people understand what climate action is, because it's often talked about in a well-meaning but quite unclear way. And so really as a very simple blueprint for climate action, which is so obvious, but I think it's still worth saying because not everyone is so familiar with it, that we can think about the 2 main planks of climate action, mitigation and adaptation, and apply them both in terms of how museums can support society and how they can apply it to their own operations. So how they can support sustainable lifestyles, as some people have spoken about, how they can reduce their own carbon footprint, greenhouse gas emissions, how they can support communities to adapt, we've heard that many times today, and also how they can make sure that their own institutions are going to be fit for the future and able to face current and future climate impacts. And the last one is to make sure that all of this is done in a fair way, so that we move away from a small, relatively small part of society which consumes too much, which is also tends to be the part of society that makes most use of museums, and how we change what we do to support more of society for a better, fairer future. Yeah, and also I'll stop there, Nunzia, because I'll speak afterwards as well with the conclusion. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Harry. I would like to know if there are someone from the audit that want to give say something or give some stimuli or make some questions before giving again the word to Harry for the conclusion. I don't know if Peter wanted to add something or if Raul wanted to add something. Maybe after Harry, we can just to underline the other two things that emerged, but I don't know if there is someone from the to be connected that wanted to add questions or stimulus. In other case, we can go on to the conclusion, and maybe I would like also to add something later. Yeah. No, I'm checking in the chat. No, did you already see? Okay, no. Raul confirmed that for now there is no questions. So maybe you can go straight to the conclusions, and maybe we can try to add something in the end. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nunzia. So I'll do this in two parts. So I'll do some comments on what we've heard this afternoon today, and then I'll look at the some points that we collected from the different authors and so on. So I think I've just got a few comments I'd like to highlight over what we've heard. So, I mean, we heard from Alberto about the importance of the social role and responsibility of museums, and how the old-fashioned idea of, just the museum that preserves things as an end in itself, that is gone, that is the past. And we also heard about how the new museum definition, which was agreed last year, about how it includes many new concepts, or it expands on many of the concepts which were perhaps there in the past, but were not stated in such a clear way. So the new definition talks about the importance of fostering sustainability. And I really like that idea, because it has the idea that it's something that continues to grow. We nourish it, we look after it, we take care of it. And Peter spoke about the idea of the book as a kind of treasure trove of ideas. And I also really like this idea. It's to say that there's no one size fits all. It's something that we can dip into and find ideas and adapt ideas, and hopefully in the future add our own ideas, because this work needs all of us. And he spoke about the image on the front about how we walk on the tightrope to the sun. And I was just thinking about this as it relates so much to the work of museums and ecomuseums, that there's a question of balance, because there is a balance between different parts of society, between the agency of the museum and of people in society and different actors. There's also a question of skill that is involved, and there's a destination. We're trying to get somewhere. It has a goal. But also, if we might fall off, we might find that we fall off a bit, and we just have to pick ourselves up and get back on and keep sticking with the tightrope. And then we heard from you, Nunzia, talking about social actions and who takes actions, and also who decides what actions we should be taking. Should the museum take a back seat? Should it just help people? Should it sometimes tolerate that the things that people want to do are perhaps not necessarily what the museum itself wants to do? And how do we help people? How do we empower people and stop getting in the way with their courses of action? And then we heard from Michael, who spoke about his museum and how it had really grown from a particular challenge, a real world challenge about food and how food is used. And we heard from Franca talking about the diffuse and extended museum and how it can be a useful idea as well for universities and different kinds of institutions that historically have possibly had quite thick walls that they would rather were a bit thinner. And Jacopo spoke about action for climate empowerment, the part of the Paris Agreement, which is really relevant to the work of museums and eco-museums. And it's about education, training, public awareness, public access to information, participation and cooperation. And very often ACE gets thought of as being about education. It gets shrunk down to education, and then it gets shrunk down again to being about school. And it's about much more than that. And eco-museums can really support the participation aspect of action for climate empowerment. And eco-museums are extremely well placed to do this, and arguably much better than other kinds of museum. And Doug and Raoul spoke about the inside out, his inside out model, and really about how what we can call development is a never-ending process. It's a social process that we have to find opportunities to take part in. How we can support transformative change that is not instrumental, that doesn't kind of force people down particular directions. And Raoul spoke about his eco-heritage project as an example, really where the ideas, the models are put into practice. Claire spoke about John Muir's great quote about how if you pull at one thing, you find that it's connected to everything else. And really talking about how her eco-museum in Scotland can really aim to be a kind of catalyst to support rapid transition, which would be fantastic. Ido spoke about how we also have to keep people on board. We can't just, if we take two big steps, we leave people behind, we lose them or we confuse them. So how we make sure that we keep people on board by moving at the pace that works for them, that keeps the big ideas rooted in people's daily lives and small action. Gelsom spoke about, again, the real world challenges there and about how the challenges are often very connected. That the world doesn't exist in 17 boxes like there are in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We have the one world, we have our realities. We need to try to find the better balance. And he spoke about lots of different ways that they're working there in Ilha Grande to try to involve people so that they are active participants in shaping the future that they will live in, rather than just using the museums to document a kind of vanishing lifestyle. Nearly finished. And then we heard from Ginevra about how there are many ways that eco-museums are already looking at this negotiation between challenges and how they are brought to public visibility through aesthetics and through public performances and so on. Karen and Jamie emphasised that this stuff is not is no longer something that's far in the future. It's something that people are experiencing now. It is extremely unfair, and we need to empower people not just to face the challenges that might come, but which are here now, and the role that heritage can play in that, and how we need to work to maintain the cultural practices as part of the practical toolkit that society has to meet these many challenges. Michaela spoke about how we can focus on getting away from the old idea that there are people and nature, or people who look after nature, that people are in nature, they are part of nature, and the stronger that we can emphasize our relationships on a more equal footing with the rest of nature, the better things might be. And so I'm going to share, and Oscar spoke about the importance of having a holistic vision that we have in eco-museums, bringing together people and place, and how we focus on strengthening the agency of people and networks. And so I'm going to share my screen now with some thoughts that were gathered together. And so at the end of the pre-COP a while ago now, we spoke about, well, what is it that we need for a coalition of eco-museums and partners? And at that time, we spoke about the importance that we need a vision and principles, we need the results framework, we can use the SDGs and targets, we need a means of implementation, how we were going to do it, and some follow-up and reviews for some accountability. And so I thought I would return to these thoughts again. And so if we think about, well, what are the particular strengths of eco-museums for climate action? We can think about it both in terms of what they work on, that is, focusing on real world issues rather than internal or historical ones or collection-based ones, but really a strong commitment to the well-being of all people, of the society, community, and as part of nature. And so they're very responsive to local needs and opportunities, and also to goals and aspirations. But the strengths of eco-museums for climate action are also in how they go about this. They have this strong commitment to co-creativity, planning and acting with the community. And this is really helpful because it gets away from some of the, let's say, the unhelpful characteristics that traditional museums often have, where things can seem very top-down or patriarchal, and there often feels to be a different power dynamic. And so eco-museums are particularly open to thoughtful, impactful experimentation, and they can relate to people and communities in a more human and more, let's say, equal way than many museums, in a way that many museums would love to be able to do, but often struggle. And we can also think about, well, what is it that we already have that is working well in terms of the policies, coordinated actions, the support that exists, and monitoring and communication. And I took these 4 headings from Action for Climate Empowerment, the thing that I've mentioned a few times from the Paris Agreement, because the more we can line up our processes and our goals and our aspirations in a way that contributes to these, but in a way that we would want to, is actually a really good way to make the connection. So if we think about the policies for climate action, we already have many things. We have the 21 principles of eco-museums. That is perhaps not a policy, but you could think of as a kind of manifesto, I suppose. We have the 2 resolutions from ICOM 2019, the sustainability resolution and the one on community museums. We also have the Paris Agreement. As I mentioned, the museum sector often doesn't have goals, so it needs to get them from somewhere else. So why not just, we could just use the goals of the Paris Agreement and just take them into these are the goals that we have. Why not? We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 75 years old this year, and one of the greatest achievements of the 20th century. And we have other agreements worked on since then, the UNDRIP on the rights of indigenous peoples and the UNDROP on the rights of rural workers. And in an Italian context, we have the Strategic Manifesto of Italian eco-museums. So we already have lots of policies that we can use, and we can just apply them within our institutions if we want. And again, to look at coordinated actions, there are lots of things already happening that work really well. International Museum Day on the 18th of May is a great opportunity. Lots of places take part in that. This year, the theme was about sustainability and well-being, and these are not themes that are going to go away, so we can expect something possibly rather similar next year and the years beyond. We could also say that the pre-COP experience has been a great one as well. You know, we had the event in 2021. We're having this one now. We had this fantastic book in between. There are lots of things that are happening and that can be done. You have your Sustainable Development Festival in Italy, European Heritage Days, and a nice cooperation between Italy and Brazil on distant but united eco-museums. So these are coordinated actions that are already taking place, but of course could be scaled up. In terms of the tools and support that there is the great Drops platform, there's ECROM's Our Collections Matter toolkit, which collects together now hundreds of tools that can help museums and eco-museums to take part in sustainable development. We could just use Action for Climate Empowerment as a framework for our activity. And there were the eco-heritage projects and resources that Raoul spoke about earlier. So again, there are lots of tools and supports. And in terms of monitoring and communication of action, I think that it's fair to say there are less things here. We have ICOM Voices, the ICOM's kind of online newsletter that anyone can write an article for. There's the general conference, but it's only once every 3 years. We can communicate our activities on International Museum Day, but I think we need probably more clearer opportunities to say what we're going to do and then to state what we've done. And then if we turn now to, well, what else is it that is needed to help increase ambition and action? So if we need more effective policies for climate action in and with eco-museums, of course, the phrase think global and act local is everywhere, but in a way, to my mind, needs a bit of clarification. What does it mean? Because it can become a bit of a soundbite, so it needs to be really clear. What does it mean? We can look at co-creative shifts at different scales, whether that's in terms of supporting people as individuals, as communities. As Claire mentioned, looking at a shift to living in a bioregional way. We certainly need to look at more support for funding and policies for decarbonisation and certainly for adaptation, because it gets forgotten about quite a lot. And then how museums and eco-museums could be more clearly factored into the regional mitigation and adaptation plans. And one of the great things about Action for Climate Empowerment, because it's agreed by all the countries, it already specifically mentions museums. Why not use it as a lever to say, you know, come on, we should be included in these plans here. Those who make museum and eco-museum policies and give them money could tie that money more clearly to climate action, and certainly not to ask them to do things which are very harmful for the environment, which unfortunately does happen, where, for instance, if museum activity gets very closely tied to economic development, can be quite harmful. And of course, looking at aligning eco-museum initiatives with major regional initiatives, not just in a top-down way, but to make sure that more people, in fact all people, have a chance to say whether those are things that they would want to happen. Again, with coordinated actions, I won't go through them all because it's a great big list, but there are lots of things that we could do more of. We could co-create visions with communities. We could co-create visions with different communities. We could strengthen the role of creativity in climate action and sustainable lifestyles. We could empower more young people to take part in decision-making processes, and we could certainly help raise the voice of local communities and Indigenous peoples with their concerns, aspirations, and hopes for the future. In terms of tools and support that we might need, I think it's one of the things I do notice many times over is that there are a lot of tools. Either people don't know where they are, or they're not sure what challenge it is they're trying to address. So helping people to understand what the challenges they want to work on will help them find the right tool. And in terms, as I mentioned, there are already lots of tools. One of the things which we certainly need more of is people to show how to use these tools. I think we need more effective goals and planning and monitoring so that we can say what we plan to do, how we did it, and then look, we did it. Great, you know, to build trust, build accountability, and also to build momentum. In the museum sector and possibly in the eco-museums, a clearer understanding of human rights, what they are, how we can work with them on a practical basis would be great. And more familiarity with sustainable development, the SDGs, and how to work with them so that we go beyond saying that we support them or we are committed to them, but to say, well, what did we actually do? What were the challenges? Why did we decide to work on those challenges? What did we do and what is the impact? And then what else is needed? Again, a great big long list. Clear goals, targets and measures, sharing joint activities of individual eco-museums, collating eco-museums activities together to show how there are many voices working on similar challenges tailored to local contexts, using the SDGs and targets to communicate that activity in a way that other parts of society would understand. Playing more of a role in partnership activities like the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, which runs till 2030, I think. Contributing to national reports like the SDG Voluntary National Reviews, or to more local ones called the VLRs, Voluntary Local Reviews. More effective communication with other stakeholders, Indigenous peoples and local communities representatives. Developing more forums like this so that we can share ideas and learn from one another and perhaps get some emotional support, inspiration, and to feel that we're not on our own. And more regular planned shared communications. And so these were gathered just since last Thursday or Friday between the different authors. We just put together a Google Doc, and it's just to say that it's actually really easy to co-create sets of ideas. Then the next step is to say, okay, well, we can't do all of them, but which ones will we do? Which ones do we want to do? And then the last slide I would say here is this is just a quote from Agenda 2030, that the scale and ambition requires a revitalized global partnership, and we fully commit to this. And it would be great if eco-museums and other kinds of museums could really see themselves as part of this. And just as my closing remark would be that a better future will not happen by accident. We have to commit to it. We have to make it happen through our own work. But it's also to say that it's not just up to me or any of us to say what our view of the future should be. That should be something that is made by all of us, and museums certainly, eco-museums have certainly got some strong roles to play in that. So those are my conclusions, and I'll stop the share.
Thank you very much, Harry. Thank you very much for your conclusion. It's very useful. I hope that you can share this PowerPoint in some way, maybe also on the Drop platform, because it's very useful for understanding at what point we are. I don't know if there are some other questions. I would like just to add three things that in some way were already underlined by Harry, but considering all the presentation, I would like just to say, to highlight just 3 points. First, considering all your contribution, I think that it's very important that we must go, we need to go on among the division, among museums and eco-museums. Maybe we have to start to work together. Definitely we have already done it, but it's important that we open a discussion also considering the incredible work that was already done by the working group on sustainability of ICOM, that make a lot of publication about how the museums can give a contribution to the sustainability. So this is a point that I think it's important also because we are starting a new research, and for this research we are reasoning both on eco-museums and on museums or community museums and So I agree on this point that was highlighted by Garlandini, but also by Michela, by Rita. Another point that I want to highlight is that we need to exploring other fields on which we need to work on for highlighting how museums and eco-museums act or could act for climate change and for the sustainability. On this point, maybe we can imagine to write a new book proposal or something like that, where we can collect some contributions, some best practices on other topics. On this point, maybe Nicola Cavalli, that was the publisher of L'Edizioni, can help us on this point. I already talked with him before, and now, unfortunately, he left, but I know that there are other possibilities, and maybe we can make a reasoning about that. Another point that I would like to highlight is that we need to make active the network among eco-museums on which we are working for the Eco-Heritage project, because it is a resource. It is a resource that already exists and that we need to make active. Because we work a lot for build such network, and we have to activate such network with the new action, with the new project. It's important that we make the eco-museums and the museums aware about this platform and aware about how this platform can help us to do. Then I think, and I'm here, I would like here to quote what Jacopo said. We need to explore new action in the field of education, and maybe for doing these things, we need to interact with the different kind of institution, the different kind of cultural institution, because they, in many cases, they already done something, and they can be, and maybe for them, we can be a resource that, and for us, they can an opportunity to know and to be aware about what is already done and how we can give value to what was already done. So for concluding this presentation, I would like just to thank you very much for resisting until the end, because I know that the largest part of people connected and the people that is inside is not English mother tongue. And I know that it's hard to hear English for so many times when you are not mother tongue. So thank you very much for resisting, and I'm very happy, and I hope that we can be in touch for the future. Okay. Okay. Sì, no, dai.
Vediamo con il video la clip finale.
Okay, hi. Okay. Do you want, okay, Gelson suggests us to share his video, so we can say bye with his video, okay?
Yeah. It's very, very, very hard.
Please do it. Continua, no, fai continua. Ma lo stai condividendo, vediamo. Condividilo.
Aqui. Opa, peraí. Tá aqui.